Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a story about terrifying natural forces, but honestly, it's really a story about incredible human resilience. We're going to look closely at a part of the world that has been repeatedly tested by nature in the most extreme ways imaginable. So, let's jump right in. We're looking at Bangladesh, a country that has historically been caught right in the crosshairs of the absolute worst that the sky and sea can throw at it. But as we unpack this today, you're going to see that this isn't just a story about disaster, it's an absolute masterclass in adaptation. 300,000 to 500,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. This isn't a statistic built up over decades. This staggering estimated death toll is from a single night back in 1970. A storm swept in from the sea and took hundreds of thousands of lives in just a matter of hours. To this day, it remains the deadliest cyclone in recorded human history. It's an almost unimaginable scale of loss, and it immediately forces us to ask a really critical question. Why here? Why does Bangladesh, again and again, face such catastrophic fury? Section 1. The Geography Trap. To figure out why this specific country gets hit so incredibly hard, we have to look at the regional map. Nature has essentially drawn a giant target here, and it is entirely based on the physical layout of the region. Look at the Bay of Bengal from a satellite perspective. It's shaped exactly like a massive funnel. It's nice and wide at the bottom near the Indian Ocean, and it narrows drastically as it goes north. And right there, sitting exactly at the narrowest tip of this giant geographical funnel, is Bangladesh. Think about holding a kitchen funnel under a running tap. Because of this shape, the water can't spread out. When a cyclone forms out in the bay, it pushes an astronomical amount of seawater ahead of it. It gets squeezed, trapped, and forced directly toward that northern coastline. And that crazy funneling effect creates something absolutely terrifying, a storm surge. Now, this is a critical term for our explainer today. We aren't just talking about a big wave or some heavy rain. A storm surge is a giant, relentless wall of trapped seawater. Because that funnel shape of the Bay of Bengal forces all that water into a narrow space, the ocean literally piles up on itself. That massive wall of water has absolutely nowhere to go but up and inland. To make matters even tougher, Bangladesh is a river delta. Imagine stepping outside your front door and the land is incredibly flat for miles, literally just a few meters above sea level. You have tens of millions of people living their daily lives right at the water's edge on this super flat terrain. There are no mountains, no large hills to act as the natural barrier, so when that 10 to 20-foot wall of ocean water, the storm surge, comes rushing in, millions of people are left completely exposed with virtually nowhere to hide. It is, quite literally, a perfect, terrifying storm of geography. Section 2. History's Deadliest Storms. Knowing that geography, we really have to shift our focus to the historical record, because nature has unfortunately exploited this vulnerability time and time again. Tracing just a few of these megastorms reveals a pretty terrifying pattern of ongoing and frequent threats targeting the region. We start with the Bola cyclone in 1970, move to Cyclone Siddhar in 2007, and then to Cyclone Amphan in 2020. Each of these storms was an absolute monster, births in the Bay of Bengal, moving straight up that funnel. Let's break down exactly what happened when they made landfall. Back on the night of November 12, 1970, the Bola cyclone struck. The sheer horror of this event came down to one crucial factor. There was almost no early warning system in place. People had gone to sleep in their villages completely unaware of the massive storm surge hurtling toward them in the dark. The water basically swallowed entire communities as they slept. This absolute lack of preparation is what led to the 300,000 to 500,000 deaths we talked about earlier. It's a sobering reminder of what happens when highly vulnerable geography meets an unpredicted disaster. Let's jump to 2007 and see how this builds. Cyclone Siddhar was a Category 4 beast. We're talking about sustained winds over 200 kilometers per hour. It struck straight through the Sundarbans, the great mangrove forest, destroying hundreds of thousands of homes in its path, and thousands of people lost their lives. Siddhar proved that the raw intensity and destructive power of these storms remained an absolute nightmare for the region, decades after Bola. The storms definitely weren't getting any weaker. But right here is where our story takes a really fascinating turn. In 2020, Cyclone Amphan arrived. Now, this was one of the strongest storms the Bay of Bengal had produced in decades, causing billions of dollars in damage. Yet the death toll was incredibly low compared to the past. So what gives? Why did the 1970 storm kill hundreds of thousands, while a massive, highly destructive storm in 2020 killed comparatively so few? Keep this paradox in the back of your mind, because the answer is actually the key to this entire explainer. Section 3. A cyclone's 3 weapons. Before we can solve that mystery, we need to quickly break down the actual mechanics of a storm. There's a really common misconception about how cyclones actually cause harm, and understanding the real threat is essential to understanding how to survive it. When we think of a hurricane or a cyclone, the first thing that pops into our heads is the wind. And yes, wind is weapon number 1. It rips off roofs, it uproots trees, it's undeniably terrifying. Weapon number 2 is the torrential rain, which swells rivers and causes severe inland flooding. But weapon number 3 is the storm surge. While the wind might look the scariest on camera, the data tells a completely different story about what actually takes lives. So the crucial takeaway here is this. Most cyclone deaths, historically, are not caused by flying debris or collapsing buildings from the wind. They are caused by drowning. When that storm surge, that huge wall of trapped seawater, pushes onto a flat coast, it happens rapidly. Within minutes, the ocean has completely invaded the land, and on a flat delta, there's just nowhere to run to higher ground. The rapid influx of ocean water is the grim reality of what actually takes lives. Section 4. The Masterclass in Survival. And that brings us to the absolute best part of this explainer. Because once you realize that the surge is the real killer, you realize that if you can just get people out of the water's path in time, you can save them. Bangladesh realized this. They took the overwhelming tragedy of their past and completely flipped the narrative, creating an extraordinary triumph of human engineering and organization. When you juxtapose these two historical extremes, a crystal clear picture emerges. On one side, the 1970 Bola cyclone. High casualties, zero warning, people caught sleeping. On the other side, the 2020 Amphan cyclone. Massive property damage, sure, but highly successful at saving lives through early warning. This comparison analytically proves that, hey, you can't stop the storm, and you definitely can't change the geography of the funnel. But a new system of warning and shelter makes the absolute difference between life and death. So, how exactly did they do it? Well, they completely rebuilt their disaster infrastructure from the ground up. First, they constructed thousands of cyclone shelters all along the coast. These are raised, sturdy, multi-story buildings where people and even their livestock can safely wait out the surge. Second, they implemented a modern, highly sophisticated early warning forecasting system to track the storms days in advance. But here's the thing, technology and concrete aren't enough on their own. The secret ingredient? Hundreds of thousands of trained volunteers. The real heroes of this story are the grassroots community members themselves. Long before the dark clouds even arrive, these volunteers race into the most remote, low-lying villages. Just think about that for a second. While everyone else is taking cover, these folks are jumping on bicycles and running on foot directly toward the danger zones, armed with megaphones and sirens. They make absolutely sure that no one is caught sleeping like they were back in 1970. They ensure every single family understands the danger and personally guides them to the raised shelters. It is just a phenomenal human element. And the results? They speak for themselves. Because of this massive, coordinated disaster management model, combining modern forecasting, solid concrete shelters, and a vast army of brave volunteers, the statistics have completely changed. Storms that used to claim hundreds of thousands of lives now see death tolls drop to the thousands or even just the hundreds. It's a spectacular drop in casualties. It is a massive victory of preparation over raw destructive power. Which brings us to a really powerful takeaway from our source material today. Quote, "A country once seen only as a victim is now the world's teacher in surviving disaster." For decades, the international narrative around Bangladesh was simply one of tragedy. But today, the most wealthy, developed nations on Earth are actively studying Bangladesh's model. They are looking to this Delta nation for guidance on exactly how to organize communities and protect lives against the writhing tides. Leaving us with a critical question to wrap up our explainer today. As global climates change and extreme weather events become more frequent and more intense everywhere, how can the rest of the world adapt Bangladesh's masterclass in survival? If a nation sitting right at the narrow tip of a geographical funnel can figure out how to outsmart the deadliest storms on Earth, what can your own community learn from their incredible resilience? Think about that as you look at your own local preparedness. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this fascinating topic.